Welcome back to the most accurate podcast here at 444 Football. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle, for the Week 6 Waiver Wire Preview. As always, the column is live on the site at 44.com every Monday afternoon for you to sift through, and you can get access to it not only by subscribing with our discount for the rest of the season, for the next 3 quarters, you can also tack on an extra discount using the promo code YouTube for 25% off. No reason to jump in considering how long the season is. And there's no greater example of how long the season is than Jeff Wilson returning to our lives as this week's top pickup. Because Devon Achane, unfortunately, suffered a knee injury in the second half against the Dolphins. And although he did attempt to return and play through it, Mike McDaniel did take him off the field and said on Monday that Achane's status is, quote, to be determined, unquote, moving forward. In other words, there is now someone available on waiver wires who is going to be a key part of the Miami offense. And no matter who that person is, we should always be interested in adding them to our roster, whether we are currently 5-0 or 0-5, because, of course, they play for the Dolphins. And the good news is for us, regardless of Achane's status, we at least have seen Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert play in the same backfield together. Last year, they played 7 games together whenever the Dolphins traded for Wilson from the 49ers. And in those games, Jeff Wilson handled 51% of the team's running back carries, Mostert 45%, and Jeff Wilson ultimately out-touched Mostert 82-80 in those 7 contests. They averaged 9.5 points for Wilson and 9.3 half PPR points for Mostert. They both got there in a timeshare. And so again, if that's what we're looking at, either for this week, for the rest of the season, or just the fact that Mostert has not been able to stay healthy for his career, and now we already have Achane battling through this knee injury that we don't know the extent of, we have to prioritize Wilson on this week's waiver wire. If for whatever reason Wilson is not available because you or someone in your league already got ahead of picking him up, then I look to the Bears' backfield between Roschon Johnson and Donta Foreman. I'm just assuming 10 days between kickoffs is enough for Roschon to clear the league's concussion protocol and start in place of Khalil Herbert, who's now battling a high ankle sprain in week 6. Also, Roschon is the player we want to target in general, because not only, even if Herbert were to tough through it, have high ankle sprains, historically, limited running backs in the 2 to 4 weeks post-injury, even when they've tried to play through it. But the fact is, and always was, that Roschon is good. He's recorded just 2 fewer carries of 10-plus yards than Herbert, despite, on the year, handling just 25 carries to Herbert's 52. Roschon is also, remember, the reason the Bears have been healthy scratching Donta Foreman since week 2. And if Johnson isn't cleared by the end of this week, it's all Foreman's backfield. So we can go ahead and take our shots wherever those players are available in your leagues. But the point is, we need to, because the Bears' upcoming schedule against the Vikings, who rank 14th in adjusted PPR points allowed to running backs, the Raiders, who rank 25th, and the Chargers, who rank 20th, is a schedule to target. And if we're going to see at least one of these running backs handle a majority of their team's touches because the others are injured, again, we have to take advantage of that. In deeper leagues, I next go to Emari Demercado for the Cardinals if the Bears or Jeff Wilson just aren't available to add to your backfield, because James Conner, with his knee injury, was unable to return in the second half against the Bengals, and Keaton Ingram remained sidelined with his neck injury. Now, Ingram was limited in practice on Thursday and Friday, so maybe he comes back and spoils Demercado's perceived every down role. But we have to make these decisions on waivers before we see a single injury report. So as it stands, it's Demercado who is the only player to take advantage of, even after the team signed Tony Jones. We don't know much about Demercado, unfortunately, since he hasn't played much this year and only recorded 378 touches across 5 seasons at TCU. But we do know at the NFL Combine, he tested as an 83rd percentile athlete and recorded a 4.4940 time at 215 pounds. And when asked to step in for Kendre Miller, whenever Miller was injured in the college playoffs, Demercado did total 150 rushing yards against Michigan in that first game before running into Georgia in the national championship. So assuming Connor can't turn around against the Rams in week 6, Demercado, in my opinion, would be an every down back and someone I'm still willing to take a chance on if I'm desperate for bye weeks in a deeper leagues if Keaontay Ingram returns. I'm still prioritizing among wide receivers, and as the position as a whole, however, Josh Downs over someone like Demercado. Because whereas Josh Downs was averaging a 16% target share for the Colts from Anthony Richardson, which was 3rd on the team, we've seen now in Gardner Minshew's 2 full games, Josh Downs has upped that to a 25% target share. He's also averaged 14.7 PPR points in those 2 starts where Minshew logged a majority of the snaps, which would rank as the wide receiver 22 on the season. So I have no issues, as we did with Josh Reynolds, picking up Josh Downs now that we're taking Richardson's rushing dropbacks and turning them into more volume through the air and just starting Josh Downs weekly as a wide receiver 3 flex option with more opportunity now in the passing game. It's not as confident of a pickup as Josh Downs, but I also think KJ Osborn's there for you in every league if you need a high floor for the bye weeks, because Osborn has been miserable. Let's start there. A 12% target per route run rate so far in the season, which ranks 97th among 105 qualifiers with 10 targets at his position. Just dreadful. But we at least think the volume will be there because only Sam Howell and Matthew Stafford are averaging more dropbacks per game than Kirk Cousins right now. So if we're taking Justin Jefferson's team high target share out of this lineup, we can then just assume at least Osborn will be on the field across from Jordan Addison for all of this opportunity to soak up. I do not mind at least taking on Osborn's floor if necessary, if you're already dealing with injuries and trying to directly replace Justin Jefferson. Those are my favorite pickups of the week. But before we get out of here, of course, let's sift through some deep cuts because I think there are some sneaky players to target on waiver wires this week as well. And that's starting with Keyshawn Vaughn, who I know you didn't expect to hear from. But remember, Bucs coach Todd Bowles told reporters that the team, quote, didn't have a run game, unquote, and their loss to the Eagles in week 3. And after that, the Bucs returned with giving Rachaad White a season-low 64.2% of the team's backfield touches, compared to his season-high 89.4% share the week prior whenever he failed and pretty much made Todd Bowles mad. It's enough of a shift to think that the Bucs are going to return from their bye this week and maybe turn to a committee approach around White instead. And if that is the case, what we saw most recently in week 4 gives Keyshawn Vaughn the nod over Sean Tucker, since it was Vaughn who was not only sprinkled in for a couple touches in the second quarter behind White, but also out-touched Tucker 10-0 before the game became a blowout. Tucker was active, but he played 9 snaps exclusively on special teams. So in deeper leagues, I do want to give a speculative, whatever the word is. I'm adding Keyshawn Vaughn. You could do worse. Sticking with the Bucs, Trey Palmer, who I mentioned a couple weeks ago, but now that the Bucs are coming back from bye, just remember, if Mike Evans' hamstring injury is still lingering, it was Devin Tompkins who recorded 4 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. But it was Trey Palmer who I'm more interested in since he did match Chris Godwin and routes run in the second half against the Saints as the person who was used more in 2 wide sets over Tompkins. And Palmer has the kind of profile we should be targeting anyway. A 98 percentile athlete who ran a 4.33 40 at the combine and registered a career high 32.7% target share in his lone and final season at Nebraska. That's where we're headed in this Bucs passing game if Evans is still out. With the Chiefs having a quick turnaround for Thursday, we don't know if Travis Kelce, who was a DNP on Monday, is going to be able to play. But we do know we have already seen this offense function without Kelce in week 1. And how it functioned was, for better or worse, Noah Gray and Rashee Rice tying for the team high mark in target share. Noah Gray actually led the entire Chiefs team in routes run in week 1. And that was against a Lions defense that we've come to have more respect for. Now, we get a Broncos defense on a short turnaround that's allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. It's a completely different matchup. So if Travis Kelce can't go, I'm having much more faith in starting Noah Gray in week 6 as opposed to when we plugged him in week 1. But let's not forget about Rice, because on one hand, Rice was targeted on 50% of its routes run against the Vikings, and now he's scored more fantasy points than any other Chiefs receiver in 4 of his 5 games. The issue is that they're not deploying him. Even on Sunday against Minnesota, he ran the 5th most routes among the team's receivers for a season-low 23% route participation. If Travis Kelce's out, though, and the better Rashee Rice continues performing, I would imagine the role eventually grows. And at least Kelce's potential absence gives us enough confidence against this historically miserable Broncos defense that we're still picking up Rice with an eye on his long-term production, but we have confidence plugging him during the bye weeks or for injuries, given how soft the matchup is. We definitely need to have Rice on our rosters for the future. Some backup news. With Zonovan Knight helped off in the 4th quarter behind David Montgomery with a serious arm injury, it sounds like, Craig Reynolds is now the only contingency option behind David Montgomery for however long Jahmyr Gibbs is sidelined with his hamstring injury. I know everyone out there is shuffling running backs on the back of their rosters weekly just to try to fall into not having to spend an absurd amount of fab when we can just use that spot to shuffle around. Add Craig Reynolds to your list. And finally, another player to add to your list is Keaton Mitchell, because Baltimore's plethora of running backs they continue using, who continue not separating, just makes it more of a priority to sprinkle on Keaton Mitchell, who, yes, at 21 years old, he did open the season on injured reserve. We haven't seen him just yet, but he could be activated as early as week 6, and at least he has that trait we want with a 99th percentile speed, 4.37 40, small size, but just in case he's the one who could separate, he is the one who we should still add in 12 to 14 team leagues, given that both Justice Hill and Gus Edwards are not getting it done. Reminder, all the other deep league notes, speculative additions, rank contingency options, and positional rankings overall, all on 444.com, which you can use the promo code YouTube to get off what is already a discounted sub. Until then, good luck in week 6. And remember, be a little bit kinder than what's required. We'll see you next time.